I made a video on this previously in the past where I just talked about a custom class. It was mostly designed with 1v1 in mind. It's pretty bare bones. Like, this is kind of just like a dev update because I want to put content on the channel, also just to get feedback as I progressively make this. At some point there will be assets that, you know, patrons could use if they want to play this for themselves. But we're going to jump right into it. So the first thing is obviously identifying the themes of the class. So I think when I made the custom class video, I think something that someone gave me feedback on that I appreciated was that it's a little vague. I kind of had the pirates do a lot of things, but I think you kind of want to nail down a couple core aspects of them. Like, if you're a mech player, you know, we're kind of in a weird limbo where mech can kind of do anything. It can be a setup deck, it can be an aggro deck, it can be a control deck. But that's not really the case in Fab, right? So if you ask yourself, like, what is like the mechanologist thing? What distinguishes it from other classes? It's probably going to be boost. It's probably going to be items. There are setup decks, right, that exist in the game, but they don't use items the same way that mech does. They don't have cards that interact with items the way that we do. That would be one example, right? If you're a brute player, then, you know, RNG, discarding, to kind of hone in on it, we're going to kind of go with a couple of things, right? So the idea is like negotiation, coins, treasure. How do you amass wealth? What do you do with it? A big one, I think, that also needs to be really ramped up in a casual format is the idea of like luck and fate, right? So I was looking at a lot of really popular EDH cards. So if you come from Magic, and a lot of really popular ones are very splashy, can win you the game but can also do nothing kind of cards. So there's like a lot of cards that'll randomly, you know, play spells for free. Sometimes it also interacts with your opponent, so your opponent will also get a benefit from the card as well as you. But that being said, like, I think fate, luck, gambling, like, I want gambler's gloves to be like a staple. I want you to run gambler's gloves in the class. So how do I do that, right? So peg leg was kind of a funny one. There is a little secret to this one. I'm not done with the design, but I think the final design is going to be even more fun than what this is currently. But kind of leaning into that, right? I want people to roll at the table. I want there to be variable outcomes, right? Do you block with this on turn one and just get lucky every time you roll, or do you start the game basically with no feat? Sharing the wealth, group hugging, but obviously with the catch, right? You always need to come out on top in the deals and the bargains that you're making, both in the political aspect and in the card functions themselves. And cheating death, I don't know why, but it felt right. For some reason, that is kind of like, that's been a theme in some of the media, right? Is this idea of like the afterlife, returning from it. You know, you have like Davy Jones's locker is like something you can go to, you can come back from if you're lucky enough. So cheating death, I think, is obviously fun for a multiplayer game, in addition to also feeling at home in this kind of class. So then we're going to go into sub-themes, so a little bit more nuanced, but I did want the idea of like humans and undead pirates. That's, you know, pretty cliche. It's a little bit of a trope, but I think it's fun because you can kind of do some different things with the different kinds of heroes. So how do you identify like what is a human pirate versus a skeleton pirate, an undead pirate, right? So maybe it is just simply like the talent, right? So I'll jump ahead a little bit. The undead pirate is a shadow talent, so maybe that's all it is. But maybe you could go more into like philosophy of, you know, perhaps like the undead are just simply like brutality and aggression, maybe something closer to brute, right? Maybe they don't have blocking cards, maybe they have more RNG baked into the class, right? But obviously have a much higher payoff. Whereas, you know, maybe like human pirates have better tactical skills, right? But obviously lack some of the strength that comes from being undead, I suppose. Another big thing is coins matter, right? That's, if we go back to the main theme, the point of this is I want to be able to explain the class in one sentence, right? If someone asks me, what is the pirate class in Fab, right? In a hypothetical world where this exists, I would say it's a class that makes and spends coins, right? Boom, there we go. So very simple, gives it a clear identity, distinction, leads the direction for the design of the cards. So that's probably the biggest one, right? Coins matter. What do you do with it? How do you make them? How do you spend them? Do you ever want to spend them? Or is there a clause where if you have a certain amount of coins, you get to do certain things? I don't have an answer for that yet, right? This is just week one. But plunder was a keyword that I made for the original video. That's going to stay. I think that pretty clearly describes the class, and I think it works pretty well. we'll jump ahead a little bit, but basically plunder is if you hit someone in a turn, you make a copper if your attack has the keyword plunder on it. If you hit with 2 plunder cards in a turn, you make a silver. So the first time you make a copper. And the third time you make a gold. It's a little tricky because I almost want to word it as in you have to hit different people, because then it really leans into like the UPF multiplayer format. But I do also kind of want this to be playable in a 1v1 format if somebody were to try it out. So I think that keywording is fine. If you want to hit someone twice in the same turn at a UPF table, you can do that. But also like it lets you spread out attacks and still meet the condition for the keyword. Like you're raiding, attacking your opponents, you're generating gold this way, right? You're plundering them. The more you hit them, the more you steal, basically, right? So if you only get in 1 small point of damage, you come out with a copper. But if you're able to hit them 3 times, then the idea is that you've robbed them of everything they got and you have a gold. What is the goal for this, right? What is? I've cut out part of what? Oh well, I've cut out part of the PowerPoint. That's fine. Basically, the goal is to have a 40 card playable deck for both Blitz and UPF. I'm going to include generics in it. I think some generics can work pretty well with the mechanics. Gambler's Gloves, like I said, I want you to run it. So, there's going to be generics in here. That leaves us with still a decent chunk left of cards. So I did kind of flesh out some generics that I wanted in there. So Captain's Call, Coax Commotion, although that one could also be in the human deck as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be just in the undead pirate deck. But, we start with those, right? So I think these are fine generics that are fun for the format. Honestly, we probably could have thrown in Good Deeds Don't Go Unnoticed in here. We could probably throw in Warmonger's Diplomacy, even though that card feels frustrating in Classic Constructed or Constructed formats. I think that the card still really beautifully shines in multiplayer formats. So you could still include Warmonger's Diplomacy. Theme still works, right? So honestly, this number can be even lower, but I do want to design a lot of cards so people have the ability to run whatever generics they want. Leaves us with 34 cards, right? We do 2 specs per hero, then we're down to 30, right? If we do pitches, so if we do a full pitch cycle, leaves us with 15 cards left to make for each hero. I think that they're not all going to be cycles though. Let's go into the previous video I did, the previous cards. Were they good? What worked? The plunder mechanic, I think, worked. The 3 cards that I opened up with, these are just attacks that interact with plunder. So double tap was a card that basically is double strike, up statted by 1, but also conditional. So if your opponent blocks it, you don't get to re-attack with it, whereas double strike, you can attack with it anyway. The idea is that it's pretty strong, right? It would be a 1 cost that allows you to generate essentially 2 plunders in a turn, but if your opponent blocks it, they also deny it. So it works pretty well for politics at a UPF table. You could bargain with someone, the damage number is low enough that you can maybe make some political decision, get your opponent to take it for 2. You send the 2 at the other person, right? So even that works, where you say, hey, I'm hitting you for 2, but then I'm going to hit this person for 2. And they're like, yeah, that's fine. I'll let it hit. Boarding Crew is just literally lake tap with plunder thrown on it. Maybe it's a little bit lazy, but I think that I don't really want the plunder cards to be super over the top. I just want them to be a very easily digestible base for the deck that just get the keyword on the ground, rolling, flexible, works fine. Because then it's all the payoff cards that matter. Shank was pretty interesting as a way to pay off some of the coins. I think I'm going to still take that idea and run with it. The idea that you can actually modulate a card based on what coins you pay as an additional cost. What didn't work? I think that the sword cards are pretty bad. I made a sword of plunder, and then I didn't say once per turn, so I made like a card that would give you an action point. It's too convoluted. I get the idea of like having a pirate that can is like a sword wheeler and can swing multiple times, and they're like a duelist. But I don't really think that the game needs that. You have Warrior. Warrior already fills that slot. If you want a character that is known for attacking with a sword, like a sword specialist, you have Dory. You don't need to play the pirate class. So I scrapped that one. Once again, I still like the one in the middle, which was the final encounter, where it just gets obnoxiously overstated the more you can pay into it in terms of coins. So that's staying for sure. I need even bigger, splashier cards for UPF. There need to be really crazy payoffs. I'm not there yet. We'll get there by the end of this whole design process, but there needs to be really wow factor for a multiplayer format. There needs to be something that's just fundamentally broken, something you would just never see in a constructed format, but you need that for a casual experience, in my opinion, even though it sounds somewhat counterintuitive. Blackbeard, I just didn't like. The theme is there, right? A controlling, sort of intimidating pirate that can turn your own crew against you, or in this sense, your deck, but it's just like, it's just not thematic enough. Like, this effect could be put on a card and it would still be fine. Like, I could just put that keyword, or I could put that text box on a non-attack action and you would feel like it fits in the deck. But if it's your hero, like, it wouldn't do anything for me personally. So that's gotta go. I think there's probably something more interesting we can do. Negotiate, that's staying for sure. The idea of striking a deal with your opponent where either you benefit or they are disadvantaged, I think that's pretty good. I want to start skirting and blurring the line a little bit more on that. So maybe a form of this card that has a gray area where both players can benefit. So maybe it's either I draw 2, you discard 2, or you discard 1 and I draw 1, right? So maybe there's a middle ground to meet on there. All the cards with the chests making, things like that, that's all been scrapped. There's a new version of it that I think, in my opinion at least, I think works better. The treasure chests were just a little too bad, if that makes sense. Like, they're not very interesting. I don't know why I had it block 3. I think that we'll get to it, but I kind of like the current iteration more than whatever this is. This is a big question mark. The ship allies, right? Throwing an ally into every class is super lazy design. I'm not a fan of like every class just getting an ally, because it's like Flesh and Blood is interesting because it's not necessarily a board state based game. Like, if you were to explain it to someone, it doesn't sound anything like other TCGs, mostly because the board state like soft resets every turn. So if you attack with 4 cards, your opponent blocks with 4 cards, the board state doesn't change. Like, you both draw up at some point, but like the actual table is the same. Your life totals will probably change, but if you compare that to something like Magic, where you're playing permanents every turn, someone's board state accumulates, the other person's doesn't. Like, I think Fab is really interesting for not having so many permanents. And like, I'm not saying it's the direction for everything, but slowly yet surely it feels like a lot of classes are starting to get allies. Well, at least, like, you know, I mean, as cool as this is, you know, there's a temptation to just kind of make an ally for every class, because it's a card game, you know? It's a card game. It's easy to make permanents that stay on the field and act like creatures. And even though it's really cool, and, you know, when it's done with something like this, it feels very thematic, it is still like, just, I don't know. I'm not a fan of Illusionist, for example. I think that the game is interesting for not having permanents. So I'm about to go completely against what I said there and just say that, like, I like the pirate ship, you know, but I'm not sure if it needs it. But I like this idea of like, you construct the vessel, and the vessel, you know, is something like it's a greater than the sum of its parts, right? So it would have to be a permanent. It's not like you would turn yourself into a demi-hero ship, right? Although maybe you could. Now that we know that demi-heroes are, you know, a possible design outlet, maybe that's what it is. Maybe you turn into a crew. Maybe you're a single pirate, you turn into the crew. There's a typo, I've just realized this when I made this video. Okay. The Rising Sun, or the Rising Run, as I apparently named it. And I did it on both cards, so I just wasn't paying attention. Okay, so, you know, maybe you turn into the crew of the ship. That might be kind of cool. But then you kind of lose the hero identity. So maybe the ship is okay. I have reworked the allies, but, you know, that's a big question mark, is whether or not, do we even need one? Do we need an ally? Or can we get the theme of crewing a voyage, a vessel? Can we get that feeling without it? The last one was Tana, which was like, honestly, this slaps. This is fun, right? I mean, I kind of worded it a little bit for UPF. I was kind of in the ballpark there. I haven't reworked her yet. I'm going to, because I honestly think that this hero could be a lot of fun. This idea of like, you know, if you played League of Legends, like Gangplank, right? Just focuses mostly on damage from like these like barrels that kind of sit on the board. Because then you kind of build her to be combo. And I think she would work really well in a UPF format, right? You would have one game where either, I mean, like, but also maybe her health needs to be lower. Some things probably need to get tweaked, but the ideal world is that you have a game where you win as the player is playing this character by simultaneously blowing up the entire board, or like blowing up everyone at the same time, right? Like, how cool and thematic would that be, right? It's the like equivalent of fireballing the entire table in EDH, which is fun, and it happens, and it's fine, right? Like, it's fine to win in one turn out of nowhere, destroying the entire table, right? You need that experience, like, once in a while. You need that excitement. It can't just be like a grind fest where every game feels deterministic and you always have like a conclusive winner every time, and you felt like you knew they were getting there like 10 turns ago. Like, you need something crazy. So I think she's in a good spot, but I need to find more crazy payoffs for her. There needs to be more chaos. There needs to be more explosiveness. I think she's like on the right track though. So that was a lot amount of time going over the past examples. So we've reworked some of it, right? So the first one is reworking the original pirate, which was Blackbeard before. The idea here is like the treasure chests have been reworked. They're a lot more expensive. There's a big downside. You can destroy it and it's better than E-Pot, right? I did kind of think about letting it create gold coins or something like that, but I think that the 3 resources are a lot more exciting, right? You can do more things with that. You can play more expensive cards. You can play more things in a turn. You can pay for certain effects, right? So I think that's more exciting than just making extra coins, because your plunder cards already do that. If you have a treasure chest, then you can use it and then play more plunder cards, right? So I don't think you need like to just literally be drowning in coins. I think there needs to be more exciting outlets for gameplay. So I think resources are part of that. Super overcosted, it's going to be a blue pitch. It's kind of stealing a little bit from Plague Hive here, where when you pitch it, you get to create a random coin. So it still functions in your game plan. You know, there's different avenues on how to use it. But the most important thing to me is the bottom text, where it's you can have any number of them in your deck. Because if we look at the pirate hero, it has like a pretty tuned for multiplayer play. So I don't really know how strong this would be in 1v1. But whenever someone draws a card during their action phase, so a little bit like Valda, right? You're going to explore, which is you look at the top 3 cards, and if you reveal a treasure chest, it goes directly into play. So like if your opponent plays like Gorgtum in a UPF format turn 1, and you look at the top 3 cards, and there's a treasure chest, you've gotten E-Pot but better immediately on the board, right? So variance, excitement, interaction on every turn. There's now politics at the table, because if you play something like Good Deeds Don't Go Unnoticed, your opponents actually want to draw cards. If by the end, if all 3 of them draw cards, you might have 3 treasure chests on the table. Now you just have 9 extra resources. But then even there's a deck building consideration of how many treasure chests do you want? Do you want enough that you're going to hit every time? Because they're a non-block. What happens if you draw 3 in a hand? What happens if like your opponent attacks you and you're holding like 3 chests and you can't do anything with them? Like, you can pitch 1 on your turn, or you can pitch 2 of them to play 1 of them, but it's like pretty lackluster. Maybe it's too overtuned, but I think maybe that's fine. But you know, this can get worked out. But the idea is that like treasure chests, you're digging for treasure, you have treasure, you need to find it. This is a way of doing it. It's interacting with like a lot of group hug strategies, which are pretty common in UPF. And you can lean into that, right? So I didn't design a lot, but you could make a lot of each player draws a card, may draw a card, effects like that work for the other players. They're happy, they get cards, but you might get a little extra something out of it if you're able to find one of the chests. So we reworked, obviously, the allies. The main difference is that the human ally ship doesn't have like a planeswalker text on it. I'm really just trying to kind of boil it down to bare essentials. We can work our way out from here, but this interacts obviously with the treasure mechanic, where, you know, if you have like 5 treasure chests on the table and you attack someone, you could potentially buff it up by 15 and just like one-shot someone essentially. So basically this was just fire breathing on a card. You could put fire breathing in the deck. Maybe that's just a solution, is maybe we just cut the ship allies and just put fire breathing in the deck as a generic, or an effect like it. But I think this is pretty fun, right? When you have a bunch of resources, a bunch of chests, you can, you know, crew up this massive vessel that can just have the ability to blow someone out immediately. Hullbreaker, I think, is pretty fun. It's a flashy card, and I think that effect is just fun, right? The ability is to wipe out half of someone's deck. You know, like, You need things like that, in my opinion at least. Like, you need a flashy play that really impacts the board. So let's go into the other pirate hero. This one's pretty interesting. So I wanted the idea of it being undead. I want the idea that you can't kill it unless if there's a certain clause, if you find the loophole to kill the pirate, right? But other than that, you know, he's invincible, right? The original idea was just having it be that you just don't have a life total, and instead when you take damage, you banish cards from your deck. The problem with that is that without specific rulings, you essentially would win every game because you can never lose. And as long as you have a card in your hand to pitch to a weapon, you deterministically would win every game. There are workarounds for it. I'm not sure if this is the best solution, but I do like this for a couple reasons. Number one, it gives a deterministic clause to win the game. If you don't have any more resources in your deck, right, then you can't prevent the damage and you die. So I'm still figuring out the thematics of that, but there is the idea there that's like you've like run out on your contracts with whatever force is letting you just be undead, right? There's like a payment you can no longer fulfill. But in the meantime, it comes with a lot of power, right? So if this is a Shadow Pirate hero, then maybe you actually want to take damage because you can banish cards off the top of your deck that you can play, right? So maybe if you like run Ghostly Visit, for example, maybe you want to take damage because then you just get free cards. But then eventually you run out at some point and then you can't win anymore. And you've been at 1 health the entire time. The other thing is that because of that, it does prevent the problem of fatigue states where if you just have cards in hand, right, and you're just pitching every turn, your opponents are hitting you, you have 4 cards in hand, your deck is empty, so you take the hit, you can't banish anything. On your turn, you pitch, you play drone or something, right? You play drone or you just swing with your weapon, draw back up. That's a problem, right? So this removes that problem where as soon as your deck is out, then all of a sudden any point of damage kills you. And also, it does allow for some really fun stuff, fun in quotes, where if your opponent does have an effect that can randomly give something unpreventable, you could just die on turn 1, basically, right? Vambrace is pretty face up, but there are effects out there that don't let damage get prevented. They're very niche and very small, but if someone were to put that in their UPF deck and they show up and you randomly just go to take, you play against a Dory or some warrior at the table. I think it's just Dory who plays the new card where damage can be prevented. And all of a sudden you just randomly got killed. They hit you in the right spot, something like that. I don't know. They found Davy Jones's heart and they poked it for 1 and now you're dead, right? So that's kind of fun. There's some variability to that where maybe this is incredibly powerful, but maybe also has the potential to just randomly die out of nowhere. So there's also gonna be a ship for that, right? So the idea is that you can only play it out of the banish zone. You have to banish the ship and then it comes up from the depths or the void or whatever. So that's kind of fun. Still kind of working on cards that, I feel interesting and thematic, powerful, yet variable. So the actual pirate ship for this one, I think is pretty cool. I do like it. This effect exists in Magic. I'm trying to think of it. I think it's from Ixalan or something, but also multiple. I think Bomac Courier is another example of cards that basically bank cards, and then you can choose to cash them in whenever you want. So the idea is that you can kind of stow away on this ship, right? People can destroy the ship and then you lose all the cards. Maybe it's powerful enough that if it lives, maybe you get an entire extra hand. If you've been bargaining at the table for people not to attack your ship, or maybe you just cash in the next time around and you just get an extra card, right? So I think this is kind of getting closer to what I want it to be. Maybe once again, this doesn't need to be a ship or an ally. Maybe it can just be something else that does a similar effect, but I like that, right? The idea of, stowaway a crew, that surprise can come out of nowhere. Same goes to the ship, right? Coming out of the banish zone. I think these are good themes. These are good themes that I want for it. It's just maybe the fine details need to get reworked, obviously. Here's the last thing, one of the last things, right? So I think this feels good. Once again, maybe the stats are they're maybe a little too much, but I think that this is I think we're in the right direction, right? So the Cursed Treasure Chest is a mirror of the treasure chest from the other hero, right? But this one has a bit of a catch on it. So this one makes, like what I said with the other one, I wanted to still be able to create coins, right? But I did acknowledge that maybe having too much is a bad thing. But I think for this one it works, right? So when it enters, it can come straight out of banish. So if you took, I don't know, like 5 or something, you know, and you banish the treasure chest from one of the cards, go straight in the field. I did remove the clause from this one, so you can't have as many as you want. I think that would cause problems. So this one's only limited to 3. So there is a downside there. But this is pretty interesting. When it enters, it's just going to make coins, 1 of each. But at the end of your turn, it deals 1 damage to you. Now, I know that may not seem like anything, right? Because you're like, well, I prevent the damage anyway. But the thing is, every turn it's banishing a card. So in the early game, this is good. You're basically soul shackling every turn. And if you get multiple of them, it's like you're upping your soul shackles. But it's slowly milling your deck out. And once you get to 0 cards, the cursed treasure chests kill you, right? You die to your own curse of wealth or whatever. But then I kind of thought, like, what if in a political move, these can actually be used as weapons, right? What if you can actually give them to other players? So we're trying it out. Gift is a card in here where you can give someone the cursed treasure chest. So you give them cursed wealth, right? And they're slowly dying to it. They don't know why. You know, they're like, oh man, I just feel sick just having this chest in my possession. But obviously comes with a benefit to you. You get rid of it. But is it really a benefit? Maybe in the late game it is, when it's going to kill you and slowly ruining your deck count, you know? Maybe that's when it's interesting. But it still comes with a negotiation, a trade. You are cunning, so you still draw extra cards in addition to giving something you don't want. This one over here, extort. It's kind of just taking the Blackbeard text from earlier and just putting it on a card. I think maybe this can get reworked, but I do like the idea of having a multiplayer aspect of being able to play other people's cards. I think that's pretty fun. Interacting with other people's decks. You just want more interaction between players. You don't really want to be solitary and doing your own thing. And so we're kind of looking for avenues for that. Finally, some more equipments. These are super rough, super early development. Cutlass is coming back, not with a plunder mechanic, basically with something that does benefit from if you plunder, right? So if you plunder, so if you successfully hit someone, the sword is, you know, pretty strong, right? So 2 for 5 with go again. So the idea is that maybe you negotiate the table and you say, hey, I'm going to attack you, I'm going to plunder, but if you let me hit you, then I'm going to swing the cutlass at this person, right? Boom, politics. Interesting dynamics at the table, right? Who do you ask? Who do you want to hit with the sword? Does the person even want to get hit? Do they block it anyway just to spite you? Who knows? Trying to find ways to get players to interact and make deals with each other. Also because it feels at home in the class. The chest equipment, completely nameless. I don't even have a placeholder name for it. The idea is that you can destroy an item, so you could destroy a chest and gain a resource, but only if you plunder this turn. Problem is, I think this is a little too strong with the Cursed Pirate because you can destroy the Cursed Treasure Chest, which removes the downside. So maybe this needs to be reworked, or maybe it just needs to be class locked to the other pirate. Also, there's not really a whole lot going on here because the chests already make resources, so having this doesn't mean anything. But you know, if you can destroy a silver, turn it into, you know, 2 resources or something, maybe that's more interesting. So maybe this has to get reworked to only interact with coins. The last 2 are just 2 different pistols. One is one-handed, the other's two-handed. The flintlock pistol you would run with the cutlass. This is also pretty interesting because it's just a 1-for-1. Doesn't have go again, but if you attack someone different than your last chain link, you draw a card, which is pretty good, right? I mean, a 1-for-1 that replaces itself. You can arsenal the card. Seems fun. So the idea is, once again, you plunder someone, you swing the cutlass at someone, then you shoot the pistol at somebody else, right? And once you do all that, you've not only interacted with as many people at the table as you can, you also get a marginal benefit from it as well. And then finally, the blunderbuss is like, you know, this really explosive shotgun that can hit everyone at the table, which is pretty cool, right? admittedly taking a little bit of that new around the table mech card that simultaneously attacks every opponent. But the interesting thing with this one is that it actually gets stronger as there are less people at the table, right? Instead of you having to scatter shot 3 people at once, I just hit my mic, and doing almost no damage, by the end there's only one target you have to point your shotgun at, right? So then it deals max damage. So, you know, it's things to think about, right? So we've reached the end of the second wave of development on this class. If you have thoughts about what things you like, what things you think could be added to it, what things you think aren't working, like what things do we scrap, what things are important, what do you want to see represented in this, just leave me a comment down below. This video is incredibly long, so if you made it this far, I don't know why, but glad that custom classes are intriguing you. I honestly have no idea how this video is going to do, but I'm probably still going to make them anyway. I have no real interest in competitive content at the moment, and this is not my day job. So if people don't like it, I'm sorry. It's just what I want to do for now. So don't worry, we'll be back with bright light stuff. If A, I get a spoiler, or B, when the set comes out, we can brew up some stuff. So don't worry, there'll be stuff on the way. But until next time, thank you for watching.